Hello and welcome to In Pursuit of Clarity, episode number 14, entitled The Power of the Interpreter. I wanted to discuss what I consider another meta-level concept, for lack of a better term, and that is the immense power of the role of an interpreter. So picture you're at the head of a powerful nation, dealing with another foreign nation that speaks a language you're not familiar with. You bring along an interpreter, as this is your only option if you hope to communicate in any meaningful way. Sitting across from the foreign leader, we can get some sense of who they are and what they're thinking and what they're trying to voice. But of course, the majority of the communication flows through the words exchanged. At first glance, this situation may seem relatively run-of-the-mill and unexceptional. But if we consider the totality of the situation a bit more deeply, we'll realize this translator has an enormous amount of power in this situation. In fact, it could be argued that his power with regards to this foreign leader and his understanding of the intentions and goals and opinions of your nation is almost as great as your own, especially if they're speaking directly to the foreign head of state, as opposed to through another translator. This translation is not a completely objective process. Every individual word choice, the tone, the inflection, the cadence, facial expressions, and mannerisms, these and more play heavily into what actually ends up being communicated. With regards to the word choice, in many cases the translator has a subjective decision to make with nearly every successive word. And each choice has the potential to change the message being conveyed significantly. This allows for a great deal of wiggle room and freedom for the interpreter to color your message in a manner of his choosing. A slightly added emphasis on a word here, a detraction of emphasis there, the use of an adjective or modifier that's perhaps slightly more extreme than you'd intended. In short, he is actually the party communicating to this foreign leader, and you're required to trust him to be a reliable conduit of your information. Even if you hire additional translators as checks and balances, this main translator can still subtly shape and skew your words without raising obvious red flags to those listening in. He can also add or detract meaning from what you'd intended to communicate, especially the former. And this is what I want to focus on here. We now live in a world filled with interpreters. One could even say we're cultivating a large interpreter class. After all, what is an expert or intellectual but someone granted a credential badge to explain some manner of complexity to the world at large, to act as a middleman between this information and the rest of the world seeking to better understand it? We don't often stop to think about it, but this layer interspersed between the root information and our own ears is an incredibly dangerous development, especially in such an imperfect world prone to corruption. In my opinion, our ancestors knew this. This is why nearly all manifestations of Indo-European cultures tended to keep their laws basic and simple, short and direct and easy to understand. Why Rome oriented its entire system of justice around the root concept que bono, or who gains. Why the ancient steppe peoples, who would later move into Europe, essentially lived by the dual precepts of be honest and maintain independence by avoiding temptation and covetousness. What's more, stretching back far enough, even the written word itself was considered something of a blasphemous sacrilege, an unhealthy development. A special class, much like the bards of old, was developed that'd transmit all of our most important, formative, and shaping information by word of mouth. The voice adds an extra dimension of communication compared to the written word, making it that much more efficient and purposeful and context-rich, and simply more truly communicative, whereas the written word is dead and lifeless in comparison, and lacking that additional layer of informative value. As the world began to shift to the written word, certain individuals uncovered the powerful secret I've mentioned above. Instead of maintaining the simple elegance of the Ten Commandments, for example, they set about a subjective interpretation of the Bible and its laws and regulations, spawning tens of thousands of pages and countless volumes of what is today called the Talmud. Instead of maintaining the straightforward system of justice practiced by Rome and virtually all Indo-European nations before her, an extreme form of legalism was pioneered, in which we now drown in details and fine print. In doing so, the power immediately shifted from the creators of those foundational laws and codes of conduct to this class of individuals claiming to be the ones that really understood them, the class that insisted on redrawing them from the ground up, making them more specific or detailed, with most of the world simply accepting that this was a positive development, some form of progress. In reality, it ended up being a power transfer. This has happened across the board, in religious and spiritual contexts, with regards to economics and law, with regards to history, and this process continues to unfold with each passing year, as things become ever more complex and detailed and labyrinthian. This made intuitive sense to most of us, because we saw supposedly highly trained and educated specialists devoting themselves to narrow topics to fully flesh them out, in order to break them down into digestible pieces, to save us a great deal of time and work. It's my contention that what's actually occurred is that instead of undergoing a multifaceted education from birth, as, say, the ancient Greeks did, developing a balanced and healthy understanding of nature and the world and all of its parts, we're now pushed down narrow paths of utility to serve an economic machine. And as we lead busy and hectic lives in so doing, we now look to gatekeepers in each field as interpreters of information. These gatekeepers are essentially information choke points, with near total power over the shaping of their chosen subject matter. What this further means is that any nefarious parties that seek immense power and control no longer need to individually indoctrinate each and every person in a piecemeal way. They only need to control a relevant handful of gatekeepers via their funding sources, or their peers, or the institutions they work for. They only need to create incentives for them to play ball and push the preferred narratives, to create thought and speech controls to hem them in and make sure they don't wander from this ideological reservation, and the establishment of severe disincentives and punishments should they speak any inconvenient truths. Because these gatekeepers control the information stream flowing to all non-credentialed specialists and non-experts throughout the world, if you find a means to control them, you're able to shape reality as you see fit. And what type of person will innately be most attracted to these roles in life? There are countless exceptions here, but oftentimes it's the audacious, the egotistical, those more lacking in shame or modesty. In my experience, one of the ties that bind most wise individuals, as opposed to the merely intelligent, seems to be an innate modesty, and not a false modesty, but a very real modesty, as if they've caught glimpses of just how much they don't know, and even if they're one of the most knowledgeable individuals in the world in a given field, this type will often feel unworthy of taking on the translator role, being so certain that they couldn't do it perfect justice and not wanting to mislead or misspeak. Lesser men rarely have such qualms and jump at the chance of earning the respect of their peers, or a decent salary, or the prospect of being hailed by the public as knowledgeable or accomplished. This specific type of lesser men are much more likely to be willing to compromise themselves or their personal sense of virtues or ethics to serve the hand that feeds them, as opposed to a tireless search for truth at any personal cost. And they can be much more prone to have the type of insecurities that can lead a person into herd-like thinking and behavior. And at the same time, they're much more likely to band together to dogmatically defend ideas and beliefs and stances, even when deep down they know they may well be incorrect. This makes them the perfect willing tools for those who currently seek to use money as a means of reshaping culture and politics, and especially those seeking to rewrite the past, or control the narratives of the present, or paint the picture that orients the direction of the future. Nearly every facet of our world has come to be dominated by a mixture of deconstructionist or translator type mindsets. The vast majority of these are essentially automatons with regards to their role in this. They're merely carrying out this role unthinkingly in exchange for their piece of the pie. And my qualm isn't so much with this type. While I don't respect the type and consider their resulting effects to be devastating to the world at large, this mentality seems to be a permanent fixture of human nature. Most people, naturally, tend to put their heads down and take the path of least resistance. It's those who've created the incentivization structures and punishment mechanisms, those who set the stage in such a way to create pawns devoted to deconstruction and complexification and skewed translation. This is a root of the cancer taking over our world. Walt Whitman called simplicity the glory of expression. Socrates considered the Spartans to be the wisest of the Greeks precisely because of their insistence on simplicity. And I've always loved Charles Lindbergh's quote, "God made life simple, it is man who complicates it." These aren't just cliches. Simplicity helps create and maintain order. Needless complication destroys order, muddies waters, opens a Pandora's box to endless confusion and spinning of tires and chasing of tails, fruitless wastes of energy. And our world is swiftly developing a cult-like devotion to exactly this, to needless complexity, to complication for complication's sake. We create complexity and then new classes and occupations to interpret this complexity, and we refer to this as innovation and progress. Our financial and legal structures are testament to this. Instead of digging to discover our origins and roots, to piece together our past, or plumbing the depths of our oceans, or scouring the Amazon rainforests to discover new cures or new species, or setting the stars as our goal, many of the best minds of our age are instead pitted against one another at the behest of law firms and corporations, canceling out one another's energy and efforts, playing a pointless game that serves no higher purpose. Markets now trade derivatives of derivatives, and many men now spend their entire lives seeking creative ways to find some small economic edge over their fellow man. And for what, exactly? To what end? The root cultures of Western man seem to prize simplicity and a harmony with the natural world. And this has always felt much more real to me. Indo-European cultures across the world, especially the further back one moves through time, believed in a singular creator of all things, one source from which all else emerged and emerges. It's an interesting fact that pure white light contains all colors. We can break this light down into primary colors, and this is pleasant and intriguing and a novelty we're very taken with. It's new, interesting, and allows us to see the world in a different way. We can break these primary colors into still more, and proceed to break these derivatives into still more. At each step in this breaking down, there are opportunities for the ambitious to install themselves as the interpreter of these new fancy colors. And we can continue this process endlessly until we've long forgotten and lost sight of the pure white light from which all derivatives emerged. But the white light is perfection and wholeness. All else is dangerous novelty. Beware the power of the translator role to reshape your understanding of your own reality, especially those that tell you to mistrust your lying eyes or ears or intuition, and especially those whose words don't resonate or ring true. When we cede this power to those with ill intent, or those who serve powers with ill intent, we play an extremely dangerous game, one that can cost us our very understanding of reality itself. Thanks for listening.
This is the end, beautiful friend. This is the end, my only friend. The end of our elaborate plans. The end of everything that stands.